We're good to proceed. Okay, the June South Pasadena Public Safety Commission meeting, calling it to order at 8:37. Welcome, everyone. We have Commissioner Asseroff joining us by Zoom. I believe we need a roll call.
Commissioner Cervantes is absent. Commissioner G,
Push the red button.
Here.
Commissioner Ding is absent. Commissioner Watson,
Here.
Commissioner Alsera,
Here.
and Chair Donnelly.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. So let's start. Do we have any general public comment this morning?
There was one general public comment on, sorry, there's no public comment.
All right. First order of business to approve the minutes of the May 9th, 2022 Public Safety Commission. Was there, after reviewing the minutes, did anyone have any notes?
No.
Can I get a motion to approve the minutes as they've been submitted?
I motion to approve the minute.
And a second?
I second.
Okay. Any additional discussion before we vote? Okay, let's take a roll call vote to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
Commissioner G,
Yay.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsera,
Yes, and just a note that Commissioner Ding is on and needs to be promoted as a panelist, I believe.
Chair Donnelly.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, I'd like to take just a few seconds for Commissioner Ding to join us and Commissioner Cervantes as well.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome, guys. Our next order of business is the election of a new vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
One second.
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Watson.
I will second that.
Are there any other nominations? Okay, we have a motion and a second to nominate Commissioner Watson for vice chair. Can we take a roll call vote?
Commissioner Cervantes,
Yes.
Commissioner G,
Yes.
Commissioner Ding,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson,
Yes.
Commissioner Alsera,
Yes.
Chair Ding, Chair Donnelly.
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0.
Congratulations, vice chair. And next on the agenda is the creation of a working group for the Police Department Public Safety Assessment. Chief Zielinski.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's a pleasure to be here. As we talked earlier in the year, the police department is looking at doing an assessment of the organization. And with that, we've been very busy going out, looking at different vendors. We put out an RFP. We received 3 different bids so far. And so what we'd like to do is have a working group of the Public Safety Commission. And I would suggest that those that are interested in this group let the Commissioner Donnelly know, and then vote amongst yourselves who would be on that working group. And the idea is that whoever is on that group, and we're looking for 2 to 3 people, would work with members of the city manager's office, would review those proposals, and then ultimately decide which vendor would get that contract. It is our goal, the police department's goal, that we'd work as a collaborative group. The vendor would also meet with stakeholders within the community and look at a number of different issues within the police department, looking at efficiencies, look at staffing levels, but also through a lens of a social justice lens to make sure that we're doing what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. And then, of course, as I mentioned, with efficiency. So having said that, my goal is to have the assessment completed and in the public's hand, a public report by December. So it's an ambitious undertaking, but I'm confident we can do it. And as part of that transparency process, again, we'd like the commission to be a part of that. So if there's anybody that has any questions before we look at who would be on that working group, I'm happy to entertain and answer what I can. Yes, ma'am.
Can you please define RFP?
It's a request for proposal. Basically, it is it's an acronym used in finance or government, and that is a proposal that a vendor would submit listing their qualifications, their scope of work, and then the cost breakdown.
Are there any other questions for the chief regarding the working group? So commissioners, is there anyone that has an interest in jumping in to volunteer for this working group?
I don't mind helping out in any way. I don't have any experience in this, so if somebody else has more experience, that's fine. If not, I'm happy to learn.
Okay, thank you. Is there one of the commissioners who has been on the panel for a little longer interested in working with Beth on this?
For those that are wondering, I will say that it's not very labor intensive in terms of what the commissioners would be doing. A lot of it is advisory in nature. The vendor will actually be doing the bulk of the work. So it is really just looking to see what they're proposing, who the best vendor would be, weighing that out with their experience, with what they're proposing, breaking down the costs, seeing which is the best benefit to the city, and then also giving your input as far as what you'd like to see from the police department or what you'd like to see from the end result of the report.
Okay, well, I'd be glad to jump into, unless there's something that precludes the chair from participating.
Nothing at all.
Okay, so now we need to take a vote on who the members of the working group will be. Is that correct? Next
Yes.
step?
Yes,
If
sir.
you need a third, I can help also. If you
Okay.
want.
That would be appreciated.
I think 3 would be very beneficial. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we have Commissioner G, Commissioner Ding, and myself as the working group. Can I get a motion to approve that membership?
I'll move to approve.
I can motion it, but I just quickly, is there any functional difference between a working group and a subcommittee?
There is a little bit as far as the Brown Act goes. So this is a working group. You'll be meeting with the vendors. It is a little bit different. That's why it's classified as a working group.
And that's in terms of how we can communicate with each other as a 3-member working group? Okay.
Correct.
We had a motion?
I'll second Commissioner Alcaraz motion.
Okay. Let's have a roll call vote to approve the members of the working group.
Commissioner Cervantes,
Yes.
Commissioner G, Commissioner Ding,
Yes.
Commissioner Alcaraz.
We may have lost him on Zoom.
Let me, I can try to reach out. I guess we can circle back.
Vice Chair Watson,
Yes.
Chair Donnelly.
Yes,
Motion passes 5-0.
great. Chief, you have a working group? please let us know when you need our assistance and how we can participate to help. Next agenda item is a request for the addition of a second crossing guard at the intersection of Huntington Drive and Marengo Avenue during the 2022-2023 school year that's upcoming.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'll be starting in just a moment while we get the presentation up and running. My name is Allison Burley. I'm a management analyst with the city's police department. And the item before you is a request for the addition of a second crossing guard at Huntington Drive and Marengo Avenue for the 2022 to 2023. Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. So for that upcoming school year. Next slide, please. So historically, the South Pasadena Police Department has managed the contract for the services provided by All City Management, ACMS for short, for adult crossing guard services within the city. The contract has been in place here in South Pasadena since 2016. And previously, crossing guard services were handled by the city, specifically the police department. And there were definitely some hiring challenges just due to the nature of the somewhat erratic work hours of a crossing guard. But ACMS holds over 30 years of experience in this area. They have 260 existing programs in 25 states, making the company the largest and most experienced crossing guard provider in the country. They are headquartered in Southern California, so they do have a number of contracts aside from South Pasadena in the area. It's important to note that ACMS does carry liability and workers' comp insurance for any liability issues that may come up regarding anything crossing guard related. Next slide, please. So to start out, I'll give you just a little bit of a background description of the intersection in question. So Huntington Drive is an asphalt paved street, which runs east to west throughout the city in both commercial and residential areas. The street has a posted speed limit of 40 miles per hour. With 3 lanes of through traffic in each direction, dedicated turn pocket lanes with protected turn arrows. So basically the like what we would say like the green arrow or the red arrow on the traffic light. So those protected turn arrows and turn pockets are for both north and southbound turns onto Marengo Avenue. And there is parallel curb parking on both the north and south sides of the street. Next slide, please. Marengo Avenue is also an asphalt paved street. This one runs north-south through residential portions of the city. Speed limit on Marengo is 25 miles per hour, with the exception of the area near Marengo Elementary School on the 1400 block. There, the speed limit drops to 15 miles per hour when children are present. The street has class 2 bicycle lanes striped from Mission Avenue to Alhambra Road, with the exception of the approaches at Huntington Drive there. Next slide, please. So as you can see, the city currently has 10 crossing guards stationed at the listed intersections here. 6 of them service the area surrounding Marengo Elementary School. 1 services the area around Monterey Hills Elementary School. 1 services the middle school, and 2 service Arroyo Vista Elementary School. The contract in place has a projected approximate 6,350 billing hours for this upcoming school year. And that includes 180 school days per year, accounting for both the regular school year and summer school. And it does include adjustments for early and regular release school days. At the agreed upon hourly rate of $30.32 per hour for each of the 10 crossing guards, the projected cost for the contract is $192,511.38. Next slide. And I think I may have actually just covered that slide. Next slide, please. So city staff approached ACMS for the cost of what would be an 11th crossing guard for the city, and the cost for the addition of 1 additional adult crossing guard would be $19,570, $212,082.95, which would bring the total contract for the school year to $212,082.34. So staff does receive these types of requests occasionally for the stationing of a crossing guard at a particular intersection. Typically, these types of requests come from parents of elementary school age children due to younger children's not difficulty crossing a street, but they just haven't quite developed the same skills to assess distance and perhaps speed of a traveling vehicle, things like that. Let's see. So a similar request was received in December 2018 after a parent was clipped by a vehicle in a crosswalk at the intersection of Via Del Rey and Indiana Avenue. So up in the hills, while walking their child to school at approximately 7:30 in the morning. A traffic engineer was consulted to review the area, and it was determined that the most effective plan of action would be to add pedestrian paddles into the intersection to remind drivers to always yield to pedestrians. And pedestrian paddles are, just so you know, they are the paddles that you sometimes see in between lanes that say state law vehicle must yield to pedestrian. Slide. Okay, so there are a number of options that the city can choose to take. The first would involve the development of a crossing guard policy. A couple years ago, there was some discussion of it. The item ended up being tabled just due to it not being a priority at the time. But there are, or I guess that is one option the city can take. The other would be to hire a traffic engineering firm to take pedestrian counts at the intersection to get an idea of how many children and their families are using that intersection to get to and from school. So it would be most advantageous to take those counts once the regular school year starts back up in the fall, just so we can get an idea, or we could potentially get an idea of how many families use it. Is it 10? Is it 50? Is it 200? We don't know that at this point. Another option would be to obtain a traffic engineering firm to study the intersection and make formal engineering recommendations. It is required that a licensed traffic engineer would be the one to make those types of recommendations. But there are a number of options that an engineer could look into, such as leading pedestrian signal timing, which would be the vehicle approaches in all 4 directions would have standing red lights, while pedestrians are given several seconds ahead of any green time for vehicles in order to get out into the intersection for visibility. Another option would be the removal of north-south crossing on one side of the intersection. The city could also, or an engineer could also look into alternative crosswalk designs, things like that, or any combination of any of those above listed items. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. The city is still waiting on certain details for this. We aren't technically looking for a formal recommendation today, but if the commission feels strongly about any recommendation they'd like to make, we're happy to pass that on to the council.
I have a question, Allison. Just out of curiosity, why would the removal of the north-south crossing on one side of the street versus the other, or at all, increase safety? Is it they'll be funneling them to the one crossing guard, or is there something I'm not aware of?
Correct. And again, the review for that would need to be done by a licensed engineer. And unfortunately, I'm not a traffic engineer, but it would be to funnel them onto one side of the road for being on that same side as the crossing guard. It could involve something, maybe not at this intersection, but again, this would require an engineer to look at it.
Okay.
Could be something looking into the angle of approach at the intersection from different directions,
Okay.
or something along those lines.
I know that we've deployed like the flashing yellow lights
Sure.
before.
Yes,
That's something else that they would, like a traffic engineer would take a look at.
absolutely. Yeah, those are called, oh my gosh, reflective flashing beacons, I think is the name of them. But that would be
Something that's
another
also
option as
not on
well.
here, which I know that I was on the commission since 2016 and it was brought up several times then. I don't know if they've just given up, but I think that back then a lot of the discussion was surrounding the fact that other school districts actually have more of a cost sharing approach to this. But I know that our district has firmly said, this is not our problem, and it's the city's problem, and the police department's, to fund these things. So have there been any discussions on that as far as trying to get the district to maybe fund a couple of these additional crossing guards?
You bring up a very good point. I have seen in other municipalities where the school district does either handle the contract or at least have some cost sharing with the city. That's something that we can bring up to the school district and see if they are open to it. You know, we are obviously very involved with the school district in terms of, you know, ensuring that students have safe routes to school. And it is definitely a shared responsibility between the school and the school district, or sorry, the city and the school district.
Okay.
I have some comment. Being the parent of 2 children, we live south of Huntington. It is a very busy street. There is an active petition going on right now where parents are signing in support of an extra crossing guard. I believe that time is of the essence, and to keep studying it might result in some bad press. And so I think it would be helpful in this report to know the amount that we have budgeted, because I didn't see that in the PowerPoint. So it would be nice to know what percentage of the crossing guard funding would be as part of the larger picture. And if you study it, it will prolong the amount of time that the parents want an answer to. I think it'd be very simple to give the crossing guards just one of those little counters so that they can count how many people cross the street. That is much more cost effective. I think it would be in the long term to have a consultant, but consultants also raise cost. And I don't see the cost that a consultant would be in your PowerPoint.
Sure.
So while this warrants further study, I think that we need to have an answer to the parents that are concerned to prevent bad press.
Sure. So just to answer some of your budget questions, the $192,000 number in the staff report is what is currently budgeted for next year's crossing guard contract, which goes into effect July 1st. The cost of an additional crossing guard is approximately $19,000. So that would be to add an 11th. That is currently not in the contract, so it has not been formally budgeted for. If that answers your question.
Yes, I don't, at this point, I don't have any children of that school age. However, even though I have a son that is late 20s, he is so worried about crossing Garfield at any time because, you know, you say this is time in such a way that leaves enough time from either coming from east or west or north or south. But the people nowadays do not respect that. They do the rolling stops. So they just keep on rolling. They keep on going. And that to me is so dangerous. And I cannot imagine a small child or a parent with a small child trying to get across the Huntington street when the speed limit is 40 miles an hour. And the only thing in the mind of those drivers is making it to work on time. They could not care less what's going on with the little kids or the parents. They just want to cross and make the next traffic light. And I think you need to look most definitely into how to solve this problem. This is just weighs too heavy on what you call the parents, as well as you know, within the past 2 or 3 years, it seems that now that we are trying to get back to normal to some people is that they can fly across any street at any time, at any speed. And no matter how many policemen are monitoring those areas, the moment they are not, they come flying in. So imagine what it would be for a parent with a 5-year-old or 6-year-old that has short legs that cannot make it through 6 lanes. Remember, 6 lanes they have to go across. So to me, to think in terms of, oh, maybe will it be too expensive? How expensive is a child's life? How expensive is a parent's life? So to me, looking at this, and it, as far as cost, is going to be quite costly. But to me, one of the answers for that would be perhaps to put an elevated crosswalk that go across Huntington, and these people could cross safely without any nut flying through at whether they have green light, red light, or whatever light, because they're in a hurry and they are not thinking. So you have to take into those considerations. I am an engineer by profession, and you mentioned the studies and the this and the that. But I hate to tell you, that part that includes the pain and the suffering and the worrying is not factored into the engineering studies. It's just plain numbers. How many go here, how many go there, but you have to, we live in a place where there are human beings involved, and you have to think of in the way his parents feel about it, the amount of anxiety we are causing them. And it's not that we're causing them on purpose, but things have changed since people have got back from the pandemic. People are so careless, so reckless, and we need to protect these children and the parents. So that to me is something that should be first and foremost in the consideration of what could be done about it.
Great, thank you. So you are correct in that enforcement is definitely a part of, this type of subject matter. Enforcement is not the only solution. We are simply here to bring this in front of the council, provide them a number of options. Amending this contract would require their approval. So that is why that is one of the options listed. You are correct in that, they may choose to go that route. But just to let you know, that's why we are presenting a whole plethora of options, so they can choose one, they can choose several, in any combination that they would see fit for the city.
I have a question for Commissioner G. Are there any kids crossing at Fletcher, or is everyone just going at Marengo?
Commissioner G has actually stepped out of the meeting.
Oh.
She will be rejoining us. But
Okay,
she's
okay.
not
She
currently
may be
present.
on Zoom now.
Okay. Yeah. Do you know, Ed? I don't go that way in the morning, so I'm not really sure.
I'm sorry, I stand corrected. She is back on the meeting. If you guys. could-
Yeah, I was just curious about.
I don't recall a crossing guard at Fletcher.
No, I'm not saying there is one. I'm saying are all the kids that live south of Huntington crossing on Marengo, or is there like some type of split between kids crossing at Fletcher and Marengo?
Yeah, no, they cross at both intersections.
They're crossing at both. So I guess my question is, with regard to having a second one at Marengo, is that the best option versus maybe adding one at a different intersection and just trying to, like, you can almost put a sign on the sidewalk saying, like, kids going to Marengo, please only cross on the west side or east side of the street, where there's one crossing guard placed. I don't know, I'm just throwing ideas out there versus having one on the east and the west side of the street. Is there a way we can funnel them all to one side of the street without having to do all of this traffic engineering? Because that will take time. If that can't be done, I would say in the meantime, it's about 10% increase in the budget. I definitely think that school safety and children's safety comes first. So that's something that can be. There's nothing stopping us from paralleling this process. Basically, we can add a second crossing guard but I also think ultimately engineering will probably be the most effective way if it, like no right turn on red or any of these other changes they're doing or flashing lights will be a better long-term solution. But in the short term, I do think that it should be, patched with a second crossing guard.
Sure, and if I may add, a traffic engineer would be the one to also possibly assess if a different intersection were a good option for an
Okay.
additional crossing guard.
Also, is Public Works being presented this or involved at all?
They are. Public Works does not currently have a licensed traffic engineer on staff.
I mean, Public Works
But we are
Commission.
we are working with them because they typically would handle anything traffic engineering related.
I meant the Public Works Commission.
Oh, my apologies. Not at this point, no.
Okay.
That is something that we can look
Yeah,
into.
engineering is really more their wheelhouse. But yeah, just throwing that out there.
Hey, Allison, I have two quick questions. One, the traffic engineering study that was previously done in 2018 recommended pedestrian paddles. Were those installed?
Yes, I believe they were.
Okay. Do you have an estimate or projection of what the cost of those engineering studies would run for the city?
We are still waiting on a quote, which is why that information is not included in the staff report today. It will be ready so that we can take it to the council with the full estimate included there.
Do you recall what it was in 2018 when the traffic engineer looked at it?
I don't.
I mean, yeah.
I think because there's a lot of walking groups, and I don't think it would be unreasonable to ask parents and those walking groups to filter through the Huntington Way instead of the Fletcher Way. That way we can account for more safety, but they can so choose to go through the Fletcher intersection with the knowledge that we might not be able to provide a crossing guard there.
Commissioner Donnelly, I was present during the 2018 study, and if I recall right, I believe it was about 50,000, and it took
1.15 or 50?
50.
Okay.
50,000. And if I recall right, there are a number of other things that were included in that. It wasn't just that specific intersection. There was a much broader picture that engineer was studying, but that specific intersection, I don't know what the breakdown was for that, but I believe the study took about 2 weeks. So we're not talking a very long time, potentially. I mean, obviously Huntington Drive is a much larger, it's in a more populated area. It covers both residential and commercial area. The number of lanes are different from where we looked at in 2018 on Via del Rey and Camino del Sol. That was a very minor residential street. Huntington is obviously much different, but that is really why we're looking to go the route of a traffic engineer to provide what is the best solution, rather than just picking based off of feelings or based off of assumptions, so that we have some concrete evidence that is backed. And if we need to do some sort of street reconstruction, that we have some expertise there to help guide us. That is also considering the what state law says as far as what is required. So it is a little more of an in-depth discussion. And the reason why we'd like to do a study on it as opposed to just implement now is because we are in the summer session. So we don't know what the number of students are going to be. We reached out to our crossing guards that were there and just to get an estimate. And because they had not been counting previously, it was a very rough guess. And I wouldn't feel comfortable basing any decision off of a guess like that. So what we had hoped to do is, by bringing in an engineer, is we assume obviously is that we may need two, but based on some of the discussion today, that engineer might look at it and say, no, you actually need more, and it would be better served to put a crossing guard hypothetically at Fletcher, like people are talking about. So we really want to make sure that safety is obviously the primary concern, and we want to do it as rapidly as we can, but we want to do it in an efficient manner and a legally permissible manner as well.
Can we, just so Commissioner G is not on the panel, but she's just in the call-in, so if we can get her to the panel. And then one comment, I do like doing the engineering report, because I did notice like Arroyo Vista has 2 crossing guards. The other school only has 1, and Marengo. And I'm assuming that's all based on the traffic patterns and not, but I would hate for one to assume because of advocacy, like we can, but, so I think it just seems more fair and just way to make sure that we're covering and having the best system for our kids across the city.
Sure, absolutely. As the chief had mentioned, we do, we want to, assess the situation in the most effective way possible. So,
So the alternative to be presented, option 4 is any combination. I think what it sounds like is that I guess this is what I think, and people can agree or not agree. I think that the increased budget should be presented to council to have the option of a additional crossing guard, and also to obtain traffic engineering studies. I think ultimately engineering is going to be a good solution to this problem long term. And I think in the shorter term, an additional crossing guard will help while those engineering things are going on.
Before we take a vote on our recommendations, was there a public comment to be read for this?
oh, there was a public comment received. It has been provided to the commission and is available for the public on the city website.
So Commissioner Ding has suggested that we make a recommendation that an additional crossing guard be added, at least on a temporary basis, while an engineering solution is pursued.
So we aren't necessarily looking for a formal recommendation today. Again, if the commission does feel strongly or would like to make some loose recommendations, that would be okay. We just feel like without the quotes and the additional information that we're still waiting on, it may not be fruitful for the commission to make a formal recommendation.
Somebody's got their hand raised in Zoom.
Yeah, there's a public hand raised. Ella.
Hi, this is Ella Hooshagen. I just would like to make a public comment, if now's the time. Can I go ahead?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So I'm the parent who is working on the petition that was submitted in public comment, but I did just have a couple of things I wanted to address during the meeting. In the staff memo, table 1 shows a number of crossing guards for Marengo Elementary. And I just think it's important to note that actually, at least in terms of the crossing guard at Marengo and Huntington, her hours are not just established by the Marengo schedule, but also by the middle school schedule. So to the extent that, we're sort of thinking of that position as just for Marengo, I know that to be inaccurate. I also know from speaking to the crossing guards there that they feel strongly that there should be 2, given the size of the intersection and how busy it is. I really appreciate that the commissioners are talking about public safety as, broader than just policing and traffic enforcement. I don't appreciate the framing of this problem as sort of a zero sum. If we have a crossing guard here, that means we can't have a crossing guard over there. This is a relatively modest portion of the budget compared to the total police budget of over $10 million for the coming fiscal year. And I think to the extent that other community members are concerned about crossing guards at key intersections for them, I don't think that we need to sort of think that can't happen if we get a crossing guard at Huntington and Marengo. In terms of the alternatives that are set forth in the memo, I hope that we'll explore a number of alternatives that aren't mentioned. Left turn signals on Marengo onto Huntington could be very helpful, because then you don't have people racing to take their left while kids and parents are crossing, because you wouldn't get to, you wouldn't have the right of way to cross if someone has a left turn arrow, right? You could set the parking back further from the intersection on Huntington, so there's better visibility for people in the crosswalk. And you could do an all-way stop for pedestrian crossing during those, key hours when kids are going to school, like they do at some major intersections in Pasadena. I'm not opposed to studying it. I think that's a good idea, but I would like to echo the commissioners who would say that, you know, until we can get a study done and have the alternatives explored, let's get somebody in place. I know that the study doesn't necessarily take a long time, but you know, the coming school year will be upon us very soon. And it takes time for our council to consider these things and take action. So I'd really appreciate if we could get somebody for August 11th. And then to the extent that the study shows us that that's not what's warranted, that something else is better, you know, that's understandable. Thank you.
Great. And if I may clarify, this list of examples of possible alternatives is not all inclusive. A traffic engineer could very well make the recommendation for scramble crossing, which is the all-way crossing, including diagonal, something along those lines. So this list is not at all intended to be all-inclusive.
Was there someone else with their hand raised?
Yes, I have my hand raised. This is Beth G. So let me reiterate that as a parent, I do think time is of the essence. I do believe in further study. I think it's not a reasonable, I think it is a reasonable request to have the crossing, an extra crossing guard at Huntington, again, with, to get a little bit more data with the counters. And at least we're doing on our end. And speaking on behalf of the other parents, which we represent, I think it would be good to move forward with Jeremy Ding's proposal to study, as well as to, you know, address the concerns of the parents, because they do feel that we don't move forward quickly enough. So I just want to bring that point to light, but I am also in for of studying.
Thanks,
Guess
Beth.
what we could do is make a motion to present to council that they increase the crossing guard budget, and also to complete the RFP process for traffic study, traffic engineering.
Jeremy, do you think if we presented that as even if the additional crossing guard was temporary until the study is done, is that acceptable?
I think you'll have a hard time. Like, I think it'll be a hard time putting it there and then
Putting the genie
it.
back in the bottle, right?
Yeah, that's just what I think. I think if major engineering changes are done, like left turn lights, no right turn on red, things like that, where we really feel comfortable with it, it's probably possible. Like, you don't need two crossing guards if you eliminate the north-south crossing on one side of the street. Like, that would probably alleviate the need for two. But I think that will, I imagine on a street like Huntington, that will probably take a long time.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion, Jeremy?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that the PSC recommend to council to increase the funding of crosswalks to include an additional crosswalk, and also to move forward with the RFP process for traffic engineering, to have an engineering solution to this problem. And that's my motion. I also think it's not part of my motion, but at some point, maybe Public Works Commission has a little bit more experience with traffic engineering. They might want to get involved in this or something.
Yeah. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Let's take a roll call vote on Commissioner Ding's motion to recommend an increase in crossing guard budget and also recommend that an engineering study be done.
Commissioner Cervantes? Yes. Commissioner G?
Yes.
Commissioner Ding?
Yes.
Vice Chair Watson?
Yes.
Chair Donnelly?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
I just had one more thing I wanted to bring up. And I think school safety is something that is on our work plan and something that I would like to see agendized for next month. You know, based off recent events, I think it is timely, especially since we're in summer, to talk about whether our police are equipped and trained to handle a similar situation to what happened in Texas. And in talking to a lot of law enforcement personnel, there are some specialty items, equipment that would be useful in situations like that. And kind of last meeting, I was in timeout, so I couldn't really comment about the military weapons ordinance. But one thing I would like to kind of just talk about was that the ordinance and the name and the California state law, like classifying a lot of this stuff as military weapons, while some certainly are, I think a lot of them have a lot of application in civilian law enforcement. So I that's something that I want to address more. Is Chief Zielinski around? What do you think about kind of talking about that? Because I know that in talking to people in law enforcement, standard breaching tools and standard equipment was not sufficient in Texas, and the having access, whether through partners or in the watch commander's car for like a kinetic breaching tool would be good to have at a relatively low cost.
Thank you, Commissioner Ding. Agreed. So the last council meeting, we passed our ordinance, which was required by state law. It was the military equipment list that we brought before this commission earlier last month. But the police department is always looking at ways that we can be more efficient, provide better safety, better protection, certainly as we're talking today about school safety in the bigger picture. And then unfortunately with Uvalde, it's constantly evolving. So the police department is always looking at how we can do things better, how we can do it safer, how we can provide better protection for our residents and for our children. And as Commissioner Ding has brought up, we are re-examining some of the tools that we use. As an example, excuse me, Commissioner Ding brought up door breaching. Door breaching means entering a way we can enter a locked door. Typically, we see on television where a special weapons team would come up with a battering ram and they break through the door, which might be sufficient in certain circumstances. But if we looked at Uvalde, most schools, including South Pasadena, the doors and the door frames are metal or they're reinforced, and that battering ram will not go through that door. And I don't want to get into the specifics of Uvalde because it's still evolving. That investigation is still going on, and there's a lot of, I think, conflicting information there. But certainly the police department is reevaluating what our capabilities are, what our equipment needs and lists are. And that is something we can come back as Commissioner Ding, if the commission so approves, we can put that on the agenda and have a more robust and greater discussion, not only on what our equipment potential needs will be as we're looking towards the future, but just what our reaction, what our plan is, if you will, should something like that go on in South Pasadena. And I want to provide the commission's and the residents watching as well is some sort of reassurance in that the police department does prepare for cases like this as best as possible. We train fairly regularly on situations like this. Certainly we have a yearly regional type of training where we come together with our regional law enforcement, police and fire departments and look at a bigger holistic problem. But internally, we also train. And then every time, unfortunately, every time that something like this happens across the nation, the police department reaches out to whoever that victim group is, whether it's a faith-based group or whether it's a school learning institution or even our business community. And that also would include our city hall community, is to reach out and try to provide training. So over the Uvalde incident, we've reached out to our school district, offered them training, but the Almanzar Center and the YMCA has reached back out to us and offered to take us up on that training. So we'll be providing them training later this month as well. So we do that pretty consistently throughout the year. But as I mentioned in Commissioner Ding's response is that we do need to continue to look at this. It's constantly evolving. It's a growing thing, and tactics by those individuals, those criminals that want to do harm, is always changing. So we need to keep up with that, and some of that will require different equipment. But as that need comes along, we're happy to present it to the commission and update you with what our needs are or where we think we need to go with our training and whatnot. But I'm happy to agendize that if the commission so desires.
What's the process for putting that on the agenda? Is that do we need to make a recommendation, or is that something that?
We can do it administratively if that's the desire.
Yeah, I think that would be the timely and a great idea.
Great, thank you.
And sorry, Brian, or Allison, I guess one thing that I'm kind of curious about, because I was on the commission in 2020, and it's just kind of what I've heard is that for right, wrong, or indifferent, or what the reason is that the district has essentially distanced itself from the police department as far as working collaboratively on school safety issues because of concerns about school safety officers arresting kids. And there was a lot of talk about school to prison pipeline. I guess I would like to, or if other commissioners are interested, learn more about how the relationship with the district has evolved over these past few years. I had never known it to be a problem, but there was a lot of things that were being brought up during that time. And I just kind of want an update on how that relationship is currently and how it's evolved.
So it's talked about pretty regularly. The commission has, I'm sorry, the school district and the city meet once a month. It's a public meeting, and different topics are brought up. Matter of fact, the crossing guard topic was brought up very briefly at the last meeting, with the understanding that it would be brought to the commission today and then to the council later. But in terms of the greater security, and you're talking about the school liaison officer.
Yeah, like the SRO, like I heard that they're basically PNG, like they're not welcome. I mean, this is from parents. So I don't know how true or accurate that is.
It's been an evolving relationship. The school district in and of itself has been tremendous towards the police department and has a great working relationship. We have backed off a little bit at some parents' requests, at certainly some of the community groups' requests, and some of there's some kids that have requested also that the police department back off its presence. And I think if you go to some of the school events, we had graduation, grad night, and as we come up to the beginning of the year, we'll have football games and those type of things. We still have officers present. We try not to be a distraction. So most of the time our officer is not in the typical police department uniform. It's more of a dressed down, a casual business attire, but still needs to have police tools with them and identified as a police officer. So I don't think we can really get away with that. But given what the police department and the community went through in 2020, we backed off certainly from our presence and our involvement as much as we were engaged. We'd like to see that change in the future, but that is all based upon what the community needs are and what the school district needs are. But I think it's a great discussion to have on where we're at and the effectiveness of the program and what it's doing. I think when we looked at 2020, there were a lot of ideas and thoughts that were going around about policing and the changing and social justice. But now that we're in 2022 and we're starting to see where crime is going, we're starting to see where shootings are leading to. I think it's a great time to maybe in that discussion as we agendize for next month is to talk about this and see where we're at, what the community's desires are, what the school district is looking for, and how we can better serve our residents.
Thank you.
That's great. So let's move on to Commissioner Congress information.
Sure. So this is just a basic information item. I know you guys received the information via email, but we just have the Commissioner Congress coming up Wednesday, June 22nd at 6 p.m. to go over the commission's accomplishments over the last year and also what they're looking to accomplish in this upcoming year.
Great. I thought that was a really valuable event I attended the last one, so I'm looking forward to it this year as well. Councilmember Primuth is not with us today, so let's move on to staff liaison communications.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, good morning. For the new commissioners, welcome. My name is Paul Riddle. For those I haven't met, I'm honored to serve as your fire chief. Just quick update on the fire department. I'll circle back on a couple of things that were reported earlier in the year for the benefit of the new commissioners as well. Just an update. First of all, just for the staffing of the fire department, the staffing we remain fully staffed in the fire department. We do have 4 long-term injuries. 2 of them may lead to retirements. But we are prepared with our succession plan to move forward with promotional exams as well as entry-level testing for firefighter paramedic to address the expected vacancies coming up in the next year or 2 years. Earlier in the year, I reported that we were in the process of possibly receiving Measure B grant funds again this year. Measure B grant funds are available to those departments who provide 911 services to a community. It's excess funds that are available through taxpayers that go to emergency rooms and the staffing of emergency rooms. And when there's excess funding, then those funds are then available to fire departments who have, again, who provide EMS to their communities. So this year we did receive approval for another 90,000, just under 90,000, 89,000 for 2 more cardiac monitors. That is in addition to what we received last year, which was close to $100,000 for 2 cardiac monitors, as well as 2 new gurneys for our rescue ambulances. This year is starting off again to be an extremely busy brush fire season. We're already seeing fuel moistures where we typically would see those fuel moistures in September and October. If you recall, last year and 2020 were the 2 most busiest brush fire seasons in the state history in terms of acreage burned. So again, we work very closely with our residents, as a quarter of our city is basically considered a high hazard brush interface area. So we work very close with our residents in that high hazard area, as well as with the city public works, to make sure that the city owned vacant property is also maintained at a level that would give us enough time to deploy resources to keep the fires contained if we did have one in our local area. For the new commissioners, just a quick, so we do actively participate in the state's master mutual aid agreement. Last year, we responded on 11 major brush fires throughout the state, recorded hundreds of hours on the fire line, and actually went all the way up to the Oregon border last year. But again, all the overtime and all the associated costs with those deployments are 100% reimbursed by the state for our participation in that program. So we're definitely gearing up for that again this year. We reported early in the year that we are in the process of updating the city's emergency operations plan. That is a 3-year document that gets revised every 3 years, especially when there's significant changes in city staffing. Again, we are in the process of updating that plan currently. That was brought before this commission earlier in the year. It will be brought back in August for another basically overview of the updates that were provided in that document, and then it'll be brought to council most likely in August after the commission gets eyes on it. And at the same time, we're in the process of updating the city's local hazardous mitigation plan. That is a 5-year document. We're required to look at that every 5 years. And that plan is more specific to the hazards and threats that are specific to our community, and how the city is, in alignment to make sure that we're in alignment with our state and federal partners to actively respond to those potential disasters and ultimately recover from it. So that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Chief. Question?
Are you expecting to utilize the same amount of hours approximately to have the fire department staff to fight fires this year as compared to last year? Would that be that?
So we are expecting we're expecting a very, very busy brush season throughout the state. The state gives their projections based on fuel moisture, based on drought conditions. We're already experiencing fires throughout the state that, again, we typically would not see until later in the year. So how the system works is the state is actually divided into 6 regions. We're part of Region 1. When Region 1, which is LA County, Orange County, Riverside County, this local area here, when we're experiencing a lot of brush fires, we get resources from other regions in the state. So we're not depleting all of our resources and vice versa. So when the Northern California is burning, we deploy resources from here, and we deploy as a strike team. A strike team is 5 engine companies and a battalion chief. Not to get into the weeds too much, but just to kind of answer your question, out of those 6 regions, we're part of Area C, which is in Region 1. And Area C is all our neighboring agencies here, Monterey Park, San Marino, Alhambra, Glendale, Pasadena. And we respond with them as one engine company with 4 other engine companies from those cities. So we're not in every single rotation. Once we deploy, we come back and then we're out of the rotation for a while. So one city is not carrying such a heavy load. So typically we respond to 7 to 10 deployments a year, and each deployment typically lasts 14 days or less. They like to kick what we call type 1 engines. They get those out of the rotation as quickly as they can, and typically it's no longer than 14 days. But to answer your question, we are expecting the same amount of deployments this year.
All right, thank you, Chief.
Very welcome.
All right, I'm back. I just have one quick announcement is we are getting ready to launch our mobile crisis unit, as we've talked about over the last couple of years. And that is really something the police department's proud of. We're working with the San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments. They picked a vendor, and it'll be brought to the council later this month for a final MOU signing. And then we should be seeing our mobile crisis unit active in South Pasadena. South Pasadena is actually on the cutting edge. We're one of the first cities that opted into this program, and we're doing it in conjunction with Montebello, San Marino, and Arcadia. So it'll be the 4 cities. I might be missing one city in there, but we should see it out on the streets here within the next probably 30 days. And for anybody that doesn't know what the mobile crisis unit is, that is a mental health team that'll go out and triage situations dealing with mental health, homelessness, and addiction, as opposed to potentially a non-law enforcement contact. So if it's something where someone needs resources, we can call that team out to go and deal with that issue and provide long-term care or solutions rather than having a potential law enforcement interdiction or interaction rather. So we're very excited about it, and we should be moving forward within the next 30 days. So,
Chief, is that going to be dispatched through our dispatch or like a separate phone number?
It'll be dispatched through our dispatch. We're still working out the specific details on how that's going to traverse. We imagine that it's going to work very similar. So you would call our dispatch center in South Pasadena. If you're a resident, you would let the dispatcher know what the issue is. They would in turn dispatch the mobile crisis unit.
Okay.
They'll be in contact with the police department. They'll go out. They will look at or meet up with that individual that needs help or resources. They'll triage it, determine what the best situation is. And by having it go through the police department dispatch, though, that also allows us the opportunity to respond if it is actually a police department or a criminal offense that we need to intervene on as well. So it's a pretty good partnership. We're excited about it. It's the first time in LA County that I know of that this is going to be implemented. I believe Orange County got a little bit of a jump on us with Huntington Beach, and they've had tremendous success with their program. So we are looking forward to it.
And will this partnership be with the county or Union Station?
This will actually be with the COG, which is San Gabriel Valley Council of Governments, which is for anybody that doesn't know, we have the Board of Supervisors for the county. The Council of Governments are broken up into the different regions. And so we have one here for San Gabriel Valley, and our partnership will actually be an MOU through the COG and with that vendor.
And we'll be hearing a homeless report up on the calendar, correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
On the calendar, there will be hearing I think we have scheduled to hear a homelessness update.
Exactly. We provide homeless updates throughout the year, and certainly once we launch this program and we give it a month or two to see kind of how it's working, get some numbers and some responses back, we're happy to update the commission as well. Thank you.
Let's move on to commissioner communications. I'd like to ask my fellow commissioners to please keep your comments to about 3 minutes, just out of respect for staff and each other. Commissioner Watson?
I have no comments at this time, but welcome Commissioner G.
Commissioner Ding?
No comments, just welcome everyone.
Commissioner
Thank you.
Cervantes?
No comment.
Commissioner G?
Thank you for including me on the discussion. I have a lot to learn, so I look forward to your mentorship.
Well, thank you for joining us. That's the conclusion of business. It is 9:42 and we will adjourn the meeting.